The views and opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Open Sky Radio. Please be advised.
Hello. Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of The Fire That You Can't Put Out. I'm Melvin. I'm one of your co-hosts this week. As usual, with Kevin away, we are doing another segment show. Bear with us. We'll be back in full circle before you know it. But as I said, I'm Melvin, and welcome to The Fire You Can't Put Out. I want to thank the good folks over at Open Sky Radio for all their help, and I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode. Now, we are in the fifth year, so the first year of Obama's second term, and the economy is now starting to come around in serious fashion. Car sales are up, home sales are up, interest rates are down, and the last couple of days, the stock market here in America has been dropping of sorts. In my opinion, it's really not much more than a correction, because I've seen what's going on with the stock market as a bit of a bubble. And that bubble is deflating a little bit now. And of course, I believe it'll start reinflating again next week, because all the stocks that are being sold off will only bring in the people that are going to be looking for a bargain. So home sales are going up. There's actually not enough inventory on the market right now with respect to homes. And I think a lot of homeowners are holding out until their homes gain more value. By this time next year, more and more homes will be on the market. And with the economy recovering this past week, when the Fed got together, the Federal Reserve, they said that they are not going to raise interest rates. That's good, because that'll help the economy continue to chug along. But they said that they're considering no more bond buying. Perhaps by the end of the year, they would be completely done buying bonds. And, of course, they've been buying bonds, and it's been stimulating the economy. You know, it's an artificial way to stimulate the economy, but it is effective, and it has been working. What we learned this week was that Bank of America, now here's how this ties in. 6 former employees of Bank of America are going up against them in court. Here, I'll give you the story. Bank of America employees are now saying that they regularly lied to homeowners seeking loan modifications, denied their applications for made-up reasons, and were rewarded for sending homeowners to foreclosure, according to some sworn statements given by 6 former employees. The statements were filed late last week in federal court in Boston as part of a multi-state class action suit brought on behalf of homeowners who sought to avoid foreclosure through the government's Home Affordable Modification Program. That's the HAMP program. But they say their cases were botched by Bank of America. Of course, Bank of America says we've nothing to do with this. We are nothing but honest. Now, if you'll remember correctly, Bank of America only exists because of us. The bailout that they got, along with a number of other banks, of course, a whole bunch of banks collapsed, but the bailout that they got thanks to us, they exist thanks to us. And we are now learning more and more about how they contributed to the collapse. So, in a statement, Bank of America spokesman said that each of the former employees' statements is rife with factual inaccuracies, and that the bank will respond more fully in court next month. He said Bank of America had modified loans more than any other bank, blah-de-blah-de-blah-de. Same BS I hear all day when I hear people say, oh, it wasn't the banks that caused it, it was the government that caused it because the bank's the most regulated thing in the whole world, da-da-da. When the Obama administration launched HAMP in 2009, Bank of America was by far the largest mortgage servicer in the program. It had twice as many loans eligible as the next largest bank. The former employees say that in response to this crush of struggling homeowners, the bank often misled them and denied applications for bogus reasons. Sometimes homeowners were simply denied en masse in a procedure called a blitz. Said William Wilson, who worked as an underwriter and manager from 2010 to 2012 as part of the modification applications. Homeowners were required to send in documents with their financial information. About twice a month, Wilson said the bank ordered that all files with documentation 60 or more days old simply be denied. That's what Bank of America told him to do. During a blitz, a single team would decline between 600 and 1,500 modifications at a time. He said in a sworn declaration. To justify the denials, employees produced fictitious reasons, for instance, saying that the homeowner had not sent in the requiring documents. 5 of the former B of A employees stated that they were encouraged to mislead customers. We were told to lie to customers and claimed that Bank of America had not received documents that it had requested, said Simone Gordon, who worked at the bank from 2007 to 2012 as a senior collector. We were told that admitting that the bank received documents would open a can of worms. That's in quote, would open a can of worms. She said since the bank was required to underwrite applications within 30 days of receiving documents and didn't have adequate staff. Wilson said each underwriter commonly had 400 outstanding applications awaiting approval. Employees were rewarded for denying applications and referring customers to foreclosure. According to statements, Gordon said collectors who placed 10 or more accounts into foreclosure in a given month received a $500 bonus. Other rewards included gift cards to retail stores and restaurants, said Gordon and Teresa Terralong, who worked as a collector from 2009 to 2010. The GDP of the entire planet for 1 year is $65 trillion. That's the whole planet. Okay, that's the GDP. A lot of these mortgages that were sold that went bad, the banks only needed to sell them so that they could bundle them into derivatives. And then derivatives were then in turn sold on the open market. The banks didn't really care who got a mortgage. They just needed a mortgage. They could flip it into a derivative, get it out on the open market. And by the time the economy collapsed in late 2008, it started in 2007, but in my opinion, it fully collapsed in autumn of 2008. So right in the heat of the general election that year. They had sold banks around the world. Mind you, the GDP, $65 trillion for the planet in a year. They had sold $700+ trillion in derivatives, backed up by absolutely nothing. Obviously, whenever people say it's just a piece of paper, quite honestly, that's really all these were. And so when they collapsed, an awful lot of real money and fake money that people thought was real absolutely evaporated. The popular narrative among conservatives through this whole thing has been that the government caused the collapse. The government was stepping in and making banks give loans to people who absolutely could not afford a bank loan. If you had a carotid artery, you had a pulse, you're going to get a loan, which is what was said, and that's because the government made them. It's an incredibly popular lie because the knee-jerk reaction, obviously, is to just blame everything on the government. So when they say, is the government making people, the only thing I can think of that makes that even somewhat true in their minds is an outlawed process called redlining, where you used to be able to turn a person down based on, say, the neighborhood that they lived in, or family history with credit. A law was eventually passed that outlawed redlining and said, no, you have to judge the individual. You have to make sure that they have verifiable income, and they've got history that can be proven is with respect to work and all these other things that said you can't just say, well, you come from here, or we think this about you. So that's what was outlawed. Never was there a bill that said the government had to. What led to a large part of deregulation, obviously, is every kind of deregulation that we've been looking at over the past 30 years since the Reagan Revolution began. And when derivatives, and by the way, prior to 2000, there were $0 in derivatives on the market. $0, none whatsoever. With the Graham-Bleach-Liley Act, which was signed in 1999, that bill made derivatives legal, and it loosened up lending. And then once that happened, it created a financial instrument called a derivative. And then, of course, by the collapse in 2008, 700 trillion of these things were out on the open market. And that's what led to the collapse. That's it in its simplest terms. And the banks, and quite a few of them did collapse, and rightfully so, they should have. But that is it in its simplest terms. Of course, there's a hell of a lot of history that led to it. But that is it in its simplest terms. And Bank of America was one of the worst offenders. And they got bailed out. And now, of course, we're learning this week that they, forgive me for using this phrase, intentionally screwed over as many people as possible. And the thing with the derivative is the banks that sell them, when Wall Street sells them, they're bets on bets. You're placing a bet against something. So banks really, an honest bank, like a credit union, like I only deal with credit unions. Most people only deal with credit unions now. I own 2 homes and I have both of the loans through credit unions. Honest banks and credit unions, which are very few honest banks, but the ones that are out there, along with credit unions, lose money. And they should when a loan goes bad. When a house gets foreclosed on, when they have to hold on to a house that they are losing money on and not making money on, they lose money. But the way they had these derivatives set up, the more foreclosures that happened, the better, which is of course bad for the economy. And as it goes, what's bad for the economy is good for Wall Street. And that's what we saw happen. I have one credit card through Bank of America. I haven't banked with Bank of America in years. I had a terrible experience with them in the early 2000s. And that was just a regular old bank account I had. And of course, I got the hell out of that. I have an old credit card. If it didn't have such a high balance, I'd close it right now. I just don't want it to, because it's a pretty big, not balance, but a limit that I've got on it. And I'd close it right now if I didn't think that my credit report was going to take a hit. But I don't know. I can't stand Bank of America so much. I might just have to go ahead and do that. Because I'm kind of sick that I have it. But shout down obviously to Bank of America. And I'm honestly anticipating another collapse coming, because all of those rules like Graham Leach Bliley, which helped lead to the collapse, and the deregulation of the banks, and derivatives are still not illegal. So even with our recent good fortune that we're seeing, houses and cars, the unemployment rate going down, people have more money in their pockets. There's some numbers out this week that more and more people are starting to do home modifications, redoing their bathroom, putting in a swimming pool, home repairs that or improvements that they've been putting off for some time. So all this stuff is going back up again. But see, the fundamentals that led to the collapse, those are still there. So unfortunately, and I'm going to be the bearer of bad news here, I think that with respect to sales, home and car, Wall Street, banking, I believe that we are just filling up another bubble. And when the Fed pulls out of, and I don't think they're the only thing propping up the economy. Obviously, Americans are doing their due diligence as well. But when the Fed decides to pull out and quit buying bonds, and they start raising interest rates, and Wall Street, you saw Wall Street start tanking as soon as they said, well, we're thinking about not buying bonds anymore. I think that may happen next year. It's almost certainly going to happen next year. And I think shortly after that, if not next year, mid to late next year, definitely in 2015, which puts it the year before our next presidential election, I believe we're going to see our next collapse. And of course, because the banks own Congress, they're going to run to Congress and they're going to ask for another bailout. And I think Congress is going to give them that bailout. But that is when we will begin to really clean house in with respect to the House of Representatives and the Senate, because bailing out the banks turned out to be incredibly unpopular. for people who love laissez-faire, unfettered, unrestrained capitalism, even they said, why'd you bail them out? Because really, unrestrained capitalism is not really what they want. They want, with respect to conservatives and teabaggers, they want the government there to help rich people, to help bankers, to help the military. So I believe when next year, or excuse me, in 2015, when the economy collapses again and the banks are inevitably bailed out, I believe anybody that votes for the bailout of those banks is going to become insanely unpopular. Whatever your approval number was before that, it's going to go through the floor. And rightfully so. Last time people said, people were kind of wishy-washy on it, but people have really truly grown to hate banks over the last number of years. I've hated banks for a decade. Welcome to where I've been for as long as I can remember now. So, watch for the crash in 2015. I'm not looking forward to it, quite honestly. We got hit pretty hard by the last one. We survived, but we got hit pretty hard by the last one. But the economy's getting better and growing, but we didn't change the fundamentals. And that's what needs to happen. On June 3rd, the young college Republicans released a report, sort of a post-mortem on 2012. But they did it when they put the report together. They, by and large, only paid attention to college students. So it goes like this: a report by the College Republican National Committee was released on June 3rd. And it showed that students held positions closer to Democrats on many issues, underscoring the difficulty in the GOP's push for younger votes. Yet, the report remains vague on solutions for Republicans, and that seems to be the thing. The report's focus groups conducted after the 2012 election loss for the GOP found that young people are most liberal on a range of issues, not surprisingly given the fact that 60% of voters aged 18 and 29 voted for Obama in 2012, according to Tufts University. The report found that 50% wanted to cut government spending significantly, seemingly a winning issue for Republicans. However, a large number of respondents wanted to start with the defense budget. That part surprised me, because that's kind of the holy grail for Republicans. They say, we'll cut food stamps, we'll cut health care, we'll cut Social Security, we'll cut Medicare, anything that helps the poor, they will slash and burn. But when it comes to tax cuts for the rich, when it comes to defense, when it comes to banks, Wall Street, they don't take too kindly upon anybody getting anywhere near that with anything sharp. 54% of respondents in a March 23 survey said taxes should go up on the wealthy. These are Republicans, which Republicans have long opposed. Just 3% said taxes should be cut for the wealthy. I think it's becoming not your parents' Republican Party anymore. On healthcare, 41% that Obama's healthcare reform law would make the healthcare system better versus 32% who thought it would make things worse. By the way, at this point, House Republicans have tried to repeal Obamacare 37 times. It might be 38 by now. You know what? It's such a waste of time. The House Republicans are voting on two things at all times. Even though they say jobs, 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 it's a lie. If it's a day that ends in Y and they're at work, which they're only at work maybe 30% of the year anyway, they're voting on either A, abortion, restricting abortion rights, or B, Obamacare, getting rid of Obamacare. Once again, anything that helps the poor needs to go away. On immigration, respondents most frequently said that undocumented immigrants should be given a path to citizenship, while the second most favored initiative was an enforcement-first strategy. Republicans are divided on providing a pathway to citizenship, with those such as Marco Rubio from Florida backing one, while Senator Ted Cruz opposes it. 51% said that Republican economic policies played a major role or the biggest role in the financial crisis, while larger numbers blamed banks and financial deregulation. That's the point that I just made a little bit ago. 54% said that gay marriage should be legal, 26% said it should be left up to the states, and just 30% said that marriage should only be between a man and a woman, the official position of the RNC. The responses of individuals from the focus groups were harsher. Respondents described the Republican Party as closed-minded, racist, rigid, and old-fashioned. The report does not outright call on the Republican Party to change its instances on issues to be more amenable to young voters. Instead, it calls for the party to slightly shift its message. For instance, the report states focus on the economic issues that affect young people today, education, the cost of healthcare, unemployment, but does not say to embrace Obamacare. It says don't concede caring and open-minded to the left, but does not call for an outright backing of gay marriage. The winning issue here, obviously, because this doesn't just poll the same with the young Republicans, it polls this way with a majority of Americans too. More help. I mean, they say, well, we want to cut government this and that, but then they say, well, we would like some help with health care and we would like some help with education. And of course, a pathway to citizenship with immigration. Of course, there's a very hot debate going on right now in the House and Senate over immigration. And I believe it was Marco Rubio that said, being Latino, he's trying to lead the charge right now. Most of the Hispanic vote went to Obama in 2008 and 2012. And so when they throw out Rubio, they go, look, we have somebody brown. You can listen to this guy. And I've heard Rubio speak. Excuse me, didn't mean to botch his name. And he talks a good talk. But this recent week he said, well, if the immigration bill has anything in it that favors gay people, and I don't understand homophobia, by the way. I don't get it. But he said then he wouldn't vote for it. Off the table. So the CBO is the group that everybody in Congress loves or has loved at one time. The Congressional Budget Office is just a bunch of guys in green eye shades with adding machines. I know I'm painting a very antiquated picture here, but they're just nerds. They're just numbers guys. They run the numbers on bills, and then they get back to Congress and they say, here's what your bill would cost over X number of years. The Democrats have gotten numbers back from the CBO that said, well, the numbers don't look good on it, and then the Democrats will hem and haw, and they'll go, okay, well, then we got to change the bill. Or the Democrats have gotten numbers back from the CBO and go, hey, my bill looks great. And then they go to the Hill with their bill and they say, hey, CBO ran my numbers and my numbers look great. The Republicans have gotten reports like that too, where they go to the CBO, say, hey, here's my bill, crunch the numbers on it. CBO comes back and goes, hey, your bill looks great. And then they run up to Congress and they go, hey, the CBO, and by the way, the CBO is nonpartisan. The CBO says my Republican bill looks great. And then, of course, whenever the Republicans get a bill back from the CBO that does not look great, they go, oh my God, that place is just run by Democrats and socialists and blah, blah, blah. Whatever picture they have to paint to make themselves feel better. But the CBO estimated on Tuesday that passage of the Senate's comprehensive immigration bill, known as S-744, would decrease federal budget deficits by $197 billion over a 10-year period between 2014 and 2033. It also estimates that 8 million undocumented immigrants would be legalized. Between 2024 and 2033, the CBO estimates that the federal budget deficits would be cut by $700 billion. The CBO's estimates blast the conservative argument that immigration reform is costly out of the water. The report contradicts the $6 trillion cost estimate used by conservative groups like the Heritage Foundation, who as far back as 2007 have been unsuccessful in helping derail immigration reform efforts. But these numbers will be harder to push now that the CBO has weighed in. Many Republican senators have praised the CBO, such as Senator Chuck Grassley, who is adamantly opposed to the legislation, and has said the CBO is like God. Like I said, they've all got their opinions of the CBO, but the CBO really is a nonpartisan, just absolute numbers wonks. Why I think now the Republicans are throw up the dang fence, put up a dang fence. Well, I don't know if you noticed, but Canada doesn't have a dang fence, and they don't have an immigration problem. People say, oh, it's because they got socialized medicine, nobody wants it. Well, You can say whatever you want that makes you feel better. And then you know that's not the case. But the reason we have a problem here is not because we need to build a dang fence. The reason we have a problem here is because we have employers that will give them your job. When people say, well, they're coming here and they're taking our jobs. No, they're not coming here and taking your job. They're being given your job because they will work for peanuts or less than peanuts, and they will shut up about it because their employer tells them, hey, I will give you this job and you will work for next to nothing, and if you squawk about it at all, I will call ICE. I will have you hauled out of here, and I will bring in your brothers and sisters tomorrow. It's a very cold policy, but it gives them the constant bodies they need to do work at a very, very low price. You say, well, that must make everything that they do cheaper, right? That must make fruits and vegetables cheaper, if they pick fruits and vegetables. Or that must make houses cheaper. So, no, it doesn't. It just gives more money to whoever makes the initial investment. So if it's building houses, the builder makes more money because they're paying these guys next to nothing. With respect to fruits and vegetables or dishwashers and restaurants, no, the restaurant's just making more money and whoever's growing the fruit is making more money. But quite honestly, in my opinion, it's legalized slavery. So what we really should be doing is going after the employers who are hiring these guys when they shouldn't be. Because your jobs are not being taken from you, they're being given away. And yeah, to the people who have lived here, especially to the dreamers who have lived there their whole lives and never known any place else, for us to say we need to kick them the hell out when they've never been to Nicaragua, when they've never been to Africa, when they've never been to South America, when they've never been, just name wherever our immigrants come from. When they've never even been to those places because they were, born here, or, well, if they're born here, they'd automatically become Americans, or they were brought here shortly after birth. This is the only country that they've ever known. We're America. We're the melting pot. I'm half, or not quite half, I'm little Indian, and, American Indian, Native American, and Irish. I know my Irish people came here on boats. And, of course, my Native American people were slaughtered by white people once white people found this place. So I guess only part of me is naturally born here or is from this continent. But quite honestly, we're America. We're the melting pot, or we're supposed to be. So that's the way we should think of the people that want to be here. So the CBO says the immigration bill is going to be great. It'll help make more people legal, more people working, more people paying taxes, more people buying homes and cars, and that stimulates the economy. It's going to save us a ton of money. We don't have to build a dang fence, which isn't going to do anything. And it's a solution to a problem. So what the Republicans are saying at this time is no. And obviously that needs to change. I want to do my dishonorable mention, and then I want to do a final word. Civil rights groups have filed a complaint alleging that a federal judge made numerous offensive and biased comments while giving a lecture at the University of Pennsylvania School of Law. The complaint said that Judge Edith Jones, who sits on the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, said that blacks and Hispanics are more violent and a death sentence provides a public service by allowing an inmate to make peace with God. Obviously, my DM is Judge Edith Jones. The complaint was filed by the Texas Civil Rights Project, Austin NAACP, the League of United Latin American Citizens, the Mexican Capital Legal Assistance Program, and others. Jones' lecture, Federal Death Penalty Review, with Judge Edith Jones, was not recorded, but attendees remember some of what she had to say. The complaint states that Jones has engaged in conduct that is prejudicial to the effective and expeditious administration of the business of the courts, undermines public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary, and creates a strong appearance of impropriety. She is specifically accused of saying certain racial groups like African Americans and Hispanics are predisposed to crime and are prone to commit acts of violence. It's distressing to me that there are people that sit on the high court that hold such racist views. I'm not entirely sure how they get through law school. I'm not entirely sure how they get their jobs. But U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, I believe, is the president puts those folks up there, along with the Supreme Court. So we can always look to whoever put those people up there. But it's amazing to me, in 2013, that from up on the bench, we can still hear opinions like that. My final word goes like this. I think I was talking with my sister's wife's soon-to-be husband. We'll call him Jay. And, we were talking about paying attention to the news. I told him I was doing this podcast. And then he told me that he was following the news pretty closely as well. But then he said something that was very striking to me. He goes, I know it's all BS. And that it's not that I haven't heard that before. It hit me in kind of a weird way. And it's not that he's necessarily wrong, but so he's part right. But here's my thinking. There was a time where you could flip on the TV machine and get your straight news, crack open the newspaper, get your straight news, because news was a public service. It wasn't something that was done for profit. There was a decent firewall between the news and sales department, and never the twain shall meet, so to speak. So now when I get news, I go to multiple sources. And I suggested that to him. I go, well, it's not BS, but you have to go to multiple sources. There's so many slanted sources. Once you go to all the sources, you'll have your story, and it's going to lie somewhere in the middle. So, and I think most people's opinions are unfortunately formed by a lot of the inaccurate things that they hear. This conundrum that we have where we can't just get straight news from straight news sources like Jay and I were talking about is unfortunate. That we do have to go to so many sources, but part of that's the new media. In a 24-hour news cycle, with the internet out there, that's just the way things are. So, I got to thinking, with so many people with ill-informed opinions, I wonder what is truly in people's hearts. I wonder if the response I hear from Americans who call into talk radio shows is really how Americans feel. If I hear a con call into a lefty talk show, am I hearing what an average con thinks? I don't think so, because they generally have the widely accepted, pre-approved talking points already memorized. When I tell people I listen to talk radio, they don't understand how or why. I'll ask them what they do for entertainment, and they'll mention music, sports, TV shows, things of that nature. I'll ask them their knowledge of news events, and they'll generally have no or almost no idea. If I were to talk to a self-identified, right-leaning American, and I were to discuss the news with them, how different would their response be? Would the discussion be more thoughtful, more civil, more engaging? When we, who listen to talk radio, have a discussion, are we actually having a discussion, or are we just battling via left-right talking points? Food for thought. Thank you again for joining me this week. And to the rest of America, spare's not an option, folks. We're going to get through this. Good night.